Welcome back to Page to Picture, the podcast where books come to life on screen and in conversation. I am your host, Kim. This author that we have on today's episode writes across multiple genres, including romance, dark romance, suspense, and erotica, creating stories that explore complex relationships, emotional depth, and unforgettable characters. Her latest novel, Beach House Views, blends romance, mystery, and suspense as a dream beachfront home becomes the center of a chilling and dangerous discovery. In addition to her writing, she's also the host of the podcast, Oh Fuck Yeah, with Ruan Willow, where she interviews authors, experts, and creatives from a variety of backgrounds. Today, we'll be talking about her writing journey, the inspiration behind Beach House Views, balancing multiple creative projects, and so much more. An author, podcaster, audiobook narrator, and storyteller, ladies and gents, this is Ruan Willow. So let's talk about you and your writing. You write across erotic romance, dark romance, and suspense. How did you find your lane as an author? And did you ever feel pressure to tone it down?
Yeah, I write across erotic romance, dark romance, and suspense. I even have different areas, subgenres that I enjoy doing, like sapphic and LGBTQ, lots of different subgenres. And I just have a very wide open interest area. So that's why I do all those different areas. It's kind of like I can't not do them. So for me, I don't really ever feel like I need to tone it down per se. It's more, I'm going to categorize it better. So that's why I started doing the different pen names so that it would be more recognizable to fans. Like, for instance, I do Ruan Willow, Ruin, for books that are alternative lifestyle, hot wife, those kinds of things where it's an alternative lifestyle focus. And Ruan is more dark romance, paranormal, anything magical or anything like suspense, thriller, that kind of stuff. And then, this isn't going to be perfect because I've done a bunch of books already under Ruan Willow. So it's not perfect, but that's kind of how I'm working it out. And then also, I have a very spicy pen name. Ruan Willow is another one that I have that is very more specifically extreme kinks and things like that. So for me, it's not about toning it down. It's more about how can I funnel this into a better package for, because not everybody has very varied tastes like I do. So how can I put it where people who like very specific, narrowed down topics can find those books? And that's kind of what the whole multiple pen name thing is about for me.
Your podcast and your books are both very sex positive and open, which is so refreshing and amazing. What made you want to be so upfront about intimacy storytelling?
Yeah, my podcast and my books are very sex positive and open. And I just really believe in that way of life. I believe that we were given our sexuality as a gift. I happen to believe in God, and God created our bodies. God created us to have all these pleasure sensations. God's the one who designed our bodies and our brains and gave us all of the nerve endings in our genitals, especially for females, that we have over 10,000 nerve endings in our clitoris. And we were designed that way, which means we were designed to enjoy sex and intimacy with a partner or partners. I believe anything consensual is okay. Like, I am not judgmental. If people are doing something consensual, then I'm not going to yuck their yum, right? So for me, it's just very, very important to portray that in books and in media, in my podcast, really focusing on that pleasure is important and connection is important. And I think that we also really lack the open, sex positive aspect that women should enjoy pleasure. So my books are media are very focused on female pleasure and empowerment and characters that also support that in the female main character. So it's just a viewpoint of mine. And I definitely, it's been a journey for me. I was someone who was definitely shamed as a younger person about sexuality from not only from my family, from culture, from movies, from media, and Christianity. And so for me, it's all backwards. Sexuality is a part of our humanity. and it shouldn't be put off on a shelf. It should be celebrated in all areas of media and life. And since it's so shamed and so diminished, I really want to highlight all of that. And I want to help people enjoy their lives. Sexual health is a part of mental health, it just is a fact. And I just think it's such a shame that our culture, our religions really try to downplay sexuality when we've got all these amazing pathways in our brains that are like natural feel good hormones. You feel better if you are intimate with someone, when you climax, when you have an orgasm. We have these natural processes for feeling good, natural drugs, if you will, to feel good. And we're we're left feeling like we're shamed if we do it and we shouldn't do it. And it's not for us, especially women. So this is why I'm very sex positive, and I think that we need to stop being so judgmental of everyone. If something's consensual, why do you care what they're doing? I That's what I really do not understand. Why do you care and think that you're the person going around to police everyone? Like, that's not your role, right? So for me, that's why I want to focus on it, because it's so important and it's so twisted the way it is in our world. So I just want to be super upfront about intimacy and storytelling because it also tells the full story. I started writing romance. Actually, I've kind of wrote it on and off all my life, but I really started focusing on it in 2019. And I wrote YA contemporary romance, which I still have under another pen name. But that one is kind of more geared towards the older teenage group. And I'm not going to put actual sex scenes in there, but there might be a little bit of spiciness there, and they're, kissing or touching or whatever. But I really started to crave, since I have this very sex positive opinion and very open, I really felt like I wasn't telling the full story of these characters. When I would do closed door, I felt like I was excluding the reader from a very important part of life for these characters. So I didn't want that wall to be there. I wanted it to be an open door, so to invite the reader into the character's fullness, their full life, their full sexuality as well. Why should sexuality be in a different spot? It applies to the character, it applies to the situation, it applies to the storyline. So in my opinion, you are doing a disservice if you are chopping that off and not sharing those beautiful pieces with your readers. It's more genuine and you're telling the full story. So, and I as a reader want to know that. I don't want the door to be shut and I don't get to find out what wonderful, amazing, juicy, intimate things these characters are doing behind a door. I want to know what they're doing because that impacts who they are, what they do, why they're doing their next thing. Why would I want to be cut out of that? Why would I want to cut my readers out of that? I want them to be fully immersed in my characters, not chopped off and be like, okay, nope, you don't get to know about that part. A lot of people have so much issue with sex and sexuality that they can't tolerate it almost, and it just turns them off. And instead, they're missing out on such a beautiful, wonderful world of intimacy. And when you are most vulnerable is when you're having sex or being intimate with a partner. Think about how much juicy, wonderful amazingness of those characters you're missing out on if you don't get to know that piece of them or the story. So I think it's a disservice, honestly. And I don't like to read closed door. I will do it, like I said, if I'm gearing a book towards teenagers, because I'm not going to openly put a sex scene in a book for teenagers. That's different. That's in that specific genre. But for me, adult romance written for women and men, to me, it's most valuable with sex in it.
Let's talk about your book, Beach House Views. Beach House Views sounds like a dream just off the title, but it definitely isn't a simple beach romance. What was the original idea that sparked the story?
And beach house views, it actually was a dream that I had. This is completely true. I woke up and I had the entire book in my head. Like I had watched a movie. I added some sex scenes into it, but basically the entire storyline it was from my dream. I dreamt it. I dreamt the layout of the house. I dreamt what happened between the characters. I dreamt the bad guy, John Penn. I literally dreamt it. So I did fictionalize it, obviously, and I turned it into I think it's like a 113,000 word book. So I did add some sex scenes that weren't in mine because I just feel like it really, like I said previously, all those things apply. And it was just a really fun story to write that it came from my dream, right? Like that's like so much fun. I had so much fun creating it. And it was like I woke up and I had to immediately write down all the things I could remember from the dream. Because as we all know, dreams don't always stick in our brains. So I was like, immediate, okay, I need to type this out. So I quickly typed out all the points in a kind of an outline. And that's what happened.
The house itself almost feels like a character. What role does the setting play in the psychological tension of your story?
The house itself feels like a character. I have heard this. Other people have said this to me. And I think it's just amazing. I think that is a huge compliment that they feel like the house is actually a character. Like it really is. It is like the one of the focal points of why the story happens and how it happens. It is integral. Like you couldn't take the story and put it in another house. It wouldn't work. It would not work. It has to be in this specific beach house. And so for me, I think it was just a really huge piece to be able to bring that psychological tension into the story between this couple who is totally oblivious. They're living their lives. They found this great beach house, right? They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is the biggest find of our lives." They found such a great deal on this beach house. They couldn't pass it up. They wanted a bigger house and they wanted to live on the beach. They're trying to have a baby. So they wanted a place with where they could have a nursery and rooms for children. And so for them to find this amazing deal of a house that they can actually afford, it was just, I mean, it was a huge turning point for them. And then the psychological tension that's happening is, why is this house this cheap? There is a reason. And I'm not going to say it right now, but there is a very, very good reason why this house is so cheap. How they were actually targeted to buy this house. They were like the ideal, they were the chosen, basically. They were the chosen buyers of this house from the seller. And it really, I don't think that we could have this story without this house. It's key.
What kind of emotional or psychological themes were you most interested in exploring through your characters, Juniper and Bridge?
I really enjoyed writing Juniper and Bridge because they're both kind of they're very into each other. They're very turned on, they're very horny and hot and very sexual people, and they want to have a child. So they are really exploring in the book their sexuality, and they really are expanding it, exploring it, diving into different kinks. And to me, that is a storyline for someone to actually explore their sexuality. It's a part of their mental health. It's part of their emotional health. And so to not include that to me does a disservice to any story that doesn't include that, because it's a part of who we are. It's a part of our humanity, our sexual health, our sexuality, our orientation. All of that is a part of who we are. To say that part of it is unimportant or a bad part to include in books, I think does a huge disservice to humanity. I really just do. I really strongly feel about that. And the other emotional things I could really bring in with this couple was jealousy, right? Because they start to play around with another couple and become swingers. Jealousy. How do you approach your partner wanting to do things you don't want to do? But yet, if you can get to the point where you want them to enjoy it and experiment and try it. And so I did put some of that in there for Juniper and Bridge because I think it's an important piece of a relationship. We don't have mirror images of each other for our sexuality, our urges, our kinks, our wants, our desires. There is no mirror of another person, probably in the entire world, of ourselves. So our partners are going to have different desires than we are. And how different people figure out how to appease that, satiate it, meet that. And people who are swingers have found a way to do something called compersion, where they really are more caring about what their partner enjoys. They want them to have pleasure, and they don't care if they're the only one that gives them the pleasure. They don't feel like they have to own that or be jealous of that. So it really played with a lot of jealousy and exploration and, okay, are we okay with this? Can we do this? And so for me, it was a really huge piece because I think in a lot of traditional American homes, this is not an okay thing. They don't like swinging. They don't like sharing each other with other people in that intimate way. But there are so many people that are swingers. And a lot of people who aren't swingers don't think it exists, but it exists all throughout our entire country. It's just not very well talked about or known or discussed because it's such a taboo topic with a lot of people. So for me, I just found it important to include jealousy in there and how they dealt with it. And, can they see each other as just people who are looking to be fun and flirty and try different things and appease their sexuality rather than, feeling like they have to coerce their partner into doing what they don't want to do. Like, that's just gross, right? Like, and that's just wrong. That's like abusive. So to me, it's actually more mature and emotionally emotionally mature to be able to be like, okay, I want you to have pleasure and I don't care how you get it. It doesn't have to come just from me. I just care about how you feel, your pleasure, your experimentation, your exploring of your sexuality. So that's really an important thing. And also, trying to have a baby. Like a lot of people do go through their lives and they don't get pregnant right away. But for what I really loved about doing with Juniper and Bridge is that they're thinking about that and it's kind of an underlying thing. Hey, this isn't happening for us. But they are also so into each other that it isn't just about the baby making. It's about their interest in each other. It's about their sexual turn ons from each other. So it isn't just about, okay, black and white medical, let's try to make a baby. And it is so much more to it than that. I really loved that putting out there really sexual people because so many people do read the book, and if they can't handle a lot of sex or sexuality, they get turned off and they cannot. I've had few people not be able to finish the book because there's too much sex in it for them. And when I hear that, to me, it tells me those people probably are shut down about sexuality in their own life. If you can't move through sex scenes without being turned off, I think you have larger issues going on. And maybe reading books like this will help you open up your sexuality and open up your exploration, your experimentation. I think these are important things in a way that is healing. In a way, it totally is. It's totally healing to go through these sexual thoughts, even kinks, and see these characters play this out and think, would I want to do that? What do I think about that? And if you don't like it, fine, move on. Don't yuck someone else's yum. But yeah, and when you're completely shut down by a book because it has sex in it, to me, that tells me a lot about that person. And they have work to do for themselves. And, everybody does have different preferences. So if you don't like that, that's fine. We all have our own things. I don't particularly like to read crime novels, right? And but I don't go around bashing them either, right? Like I just don't read them. I don't try to read them and then say I hate it. I stay in my own lane that way.
How do you balance erotic romance elements with suspense and tension without one overpowering the other?
Uh, you know, one thing that someone said about my book that I really liked was that they called it erotic storytelling. It's very sensual. And I really agree with that. I really liked that label. I think it really applies to this book. And to balance the erotic romance and suspense and tension without one becoming stronger is definitely a challenge. But again, I have had multiple readers love it and multiple readers not like it. Like we're all so individual that finding a perfect book that fits you with enough sex or not too much sex is really hard to meet all those readers where they are, especially when you have sex involved with it, because so many people are so full of shame and have negative connotations about sex. They're not sex positive. So they can't move through that. And I think for me, the overpowering one or the other is for me, it's just a feeling. Does this feel right to me? Is this what I would want to read? Do I like this? And so my ideal readers like as much sex in books that I like to write and read. So if you're someone who reads my book and you say there's way too much sex, then you probably aren't my ideal reader. And if you can tolerate it and still get through the book and not be so turned off by the sex, then you are probably somebody who's more open and accepting and not judgmental. So I think for me, it's not really about overpowering. It's a balance that works for me in my brain and in the characters, because the characters really guide the story for me. If the characters are doing what they do what they want. I don't really necessarily, I might decide that I think something should happen, but they decide it. They really drive it. Very character driven for me. I might think, oh, this is going to happen. They'll be like, nope, nope, this is what's going to happen. Nope, you're not right. Because they're alive to me. They exist. They are in a different realm of reality. They really are. They're real. So, there are people that have sex every day, right? Okay, that is a very real thing. So people that say there's too much sex in a story, well, that is a lot of people's reality is sex every day. Some people have sex multiple times a day. So to me, it's I don't know. You can't meet every reader for what they want. You just have to write the story, and then you hopefully find your readers that feel like one isn't overpowering the other. It's a balance. I mean, you don't want to have all erotic stuff because then it's more just, erotica. To me, that's the difference between erotica and erotic romance is there's actual story, there's romance going on in the erotic romance, whereas erotica sometimes can be just the sex, right? That's one distinction that I've heard it say anyway.
Did you know the darker turns the story would take from the beginning, or did it evolve as you wrote?
I did know most of the darker turns of the story. I did add in a little bit that wasn't in my dream, but I knew like the overall character of John Penn and what he was capable of before I started writing it. Because again, I had the dream and he was a full-fledged character or person in my brain. But I did add some of the things that he did that were not in my dream that really fit that to create the storyline further to push it to the extreme degree because he is a very extreme person. He does a lot of extreme things and he thinks that he's all justified in everything that he does. So that was a huge piece for me too. I don't know. There's a lot of darkness. I've had a few readers come to me and be like, I hated him. But to me, that was like, I really did a good job portraying him of how he really is because they had such a strong reaction to him. To me, that is a success as portraying that character in the story for the reader.
What scene was the most challenging or the most fun for you to write?
The most challenging scene to write was like I had it written originally. Like I wrote this actually back in 2020, and I had written the final scene way back then. And I didn't like how it played out, so I did change it a little bit. So it was a bit challenging because of what happens in that scene, and it is violence. So I don't tend to write violence very much. So for me, that was probably the most challenging to make it be real and make it be how she was really feeling and make it, portray how he's feeling when I'm not doing first person in his viewpoint. And, neither of them so to me, that was probably the most challenging, just because of the content. I don't generally write violence. I write love and I write sex and I write romance and I write relationships. So violence was something that I very rarely have written. So it was definitely a challenge, but it was still fun and I liked the way it turned out. But that was probably the most challenging.
What do you think readers misunderstand most about dark romance as a genre?
I think a lot of people do misunderstand dark romance as a genre. I think that's very, very true. And some people like it for processing their own experiences, or they like it because they like the extremity of it. They like it because there is a bad guy. They like it because it challenges our thoughts and our views and how a relationship should go, but it also reflects the wacky, crazy, vile, evil people and relationships that do actually exist in reality. So I think that it is something that is intriguing to people, just as horror is intriguing, just as any kind of suspense thriller, like a serial killer or whatever. We're kind of like awed by these people that are maybe not quite mainstream. They're out there. They may have mental illness. They may be psychotic, like John Penn, but he doesn't think he's psychotic. So I think that dark romance can also be just plain entertainment. It can be a healing tool. It can be, wow, that was amazing. Like just to help us think in different ways. Explore dark kinks is another way. There's BDSM. There's, impact play, that kind of stuff. And also just to we're all kind of interested in those kind of different worlds, right? Like the mafia, like, oh, you name it, any crime syndicates, those kind of things, those extremities, we find interesting and we tend to seek them out and we want to know more about them and how is this person like this? How did they get like this? How do they move through their world? How can they continue to move through their world? How can they even think like that, right? It's just exploration. exploration and entertainment, those are the things I think about. And some people think, oh, that's abuse. Well, depends on how you look at things. Yes, people write abuse, but abuse happens in the world too. So fiction is made up, but it's a reflection of reality, which I believe dark romance is as well. But it's also just a story too. So it's not like people who have it in their story are promoting abuse. They're documenting it, they're writing about it. These things exist in human relationships. And so to me, they're just using those in the story. It's a part of the story, it's a part of the characters. But dark romance doesn't have to be like in my book is more dark romance is more where John Penn is coming from. Like he's really the dark romance element in Beach House Views because he is the dark. And Juniper and Bridge have a romance. And as dark as they get is like, impact play, a little bit of, spanking and, just a little bit of kinkiness. That's as dark as they get for their romance. Now, John Penn, on the other hand, is a completely different story. I think that people who like stories about things like thrillers and, really extreme things, people that are, maybe stalkers or serial killers or murderers, if you are interested in those types of elements, I would think that you should give my book a chance because it also explores what does this look like in relation to how someone interacts with their world. Like John Penn has a very skewed view of the world, but he thinks that what he's doing is loving and admiration, right? So if you like that kind of element, I think you should definitely give Beach House Views a try. If you like sex in your books, definitely. And if you can tolerate different types of sexuality, there's some female scenes in there where Juniper is exploring her. When she was in college, she did some hookup fun with her friend Sarah, and this is revisited in the book. She kind of is having a reawakening of her bi-curious nature. But she has basically largely lived a heterosexual life with her husband, Bridge. But they're both exploring their sexuality in the book, and so some of those pieces are in there. So if you like sex in your books, it's hot. It's very sexy. It's very intense. And there's definitely dark elements and there's also beautiful elements.
What is one feeling you hope readers walk away with after finishing Beach House Views?
I hope people walk away after finishing Beach House Views with a feeling of awe and wow. And that was very sensual. That was amazing. That was also very jarring. And I hope that they feel satisfied and entertained and perhaps maybe learned a little bit about maybe themselves and their own sexuality and reading it and thinking about different things, different sexuality experiences, expressions, maybe being a bit less judgmental. I don't know. I guess those are the things that I would like people to walk away with and maybe to think about their own sexuality a little bit more and maybe their own adventure and instead of hiding from their desires and their kinks and maybe trying a kink, trying a fetish, something they were maybe scared to try before.
So, because we are a podcast that loves books adaptations, we have to ask, if Beach House Views were adapted for film or television, do you have any dream casting choices?
If Beach House Muse was made into a film or television, oh, I think it would be a great movie. Like I said, when I woke up after the dream, it was like I watched the movie of it. So to me, in my brain, it is a movie already. It would really be a great movie because a lot of people like thrillers and I like suspense. And I think it would be great. I don't know about casting choices. Oh, that's a really tough one. I don't know if I could pick. I don't really know. I just would hope that they would be characters who would portray open sexuality and acceptance. And of course, with their John Penn, I hope they could play the evil guy really well. I don't know. I don't have any names, I guess. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
What is one scene that is a must and it has to be made into the adaptation? No ands, ifs, or buts.
One scene that I would love to definitely see included in the adaptation is when when they find out what's going on, and there's three people that are together when they find this crazy, amazing, shocking revelation about the house and what is going on here. I love the whole, like, because as a reader, we know what's going on, right? We've known all along, but Juniper and Bridge are finding this out in this scene. And I think that that would be just such a huge piece and turning point where all along the book, we're like, we know what's going on. And Juniper has these guesses of what's going on. And she thinks she's maybe being a little bit crazy. She's being a little paranoid, but we know the truth as the readers. We get clued in to what John Penn is doing and what he's thinking. So I really think that would be a huge one to have there in the movie. What a dream. That would be awesome to have it be where they're physically doing something in the house and then they figure it out and they're just jarred. They're like, what in the world is this? What could this possibly be? And it's quite shocking.
If you could pick the soundtrack song for the trailer, what would it be?
Oh, a soundtrack song for the trailer. Oh, anything with suspense in it. I've played a little bit with that on Instagram where you can, like, pick songs, you put in suspense, and there's so many good musical pieces about suspense. So for me, I really think of, like, when I think of it, I'm thinking of like an instrumental, song that has all instrument, no words, no people singing, but it's just a huge buildup. And it's a the song, the music notes of the instruments, they bring that piece of suspense there very, very beautifully, I think, without any words. So I would pick something instrumental that builds suspense and, like, anticipation.
Before we go, can you please tell our listeners what can they expect next from you?
What's coming up next for me right now? I'm writing Spring Break. Spring Break and stranded at a cabin with 7 chosen men. The first book is also, this is a dark romance series as well. It's a Snow White retelling. Why choose? And there's a love triangle between the main character and her best friend's two brothers. So basically, what happens is she's going to a cabin with her best friend, and her best friend ends up not being able to go. But come and behold, her brother and all of his med school students and her best friend's twin brother end up at the house. So she ends up at the house in the first book, Spring Break and Stranded, with her brothers, with 8 men. Spring Break and Stranded at a cabin with 8 men. It's all these men and her, and they kind of go into this, like, surreal area of the world in their brains where, kind of like at Vegas, what happens at Vegas stays in Vegas, what happens at the cabin stays at the cabin. And they start to explore their sexuality and multiple partner things. And they're all just doing all these different sexual exploration and filling out their fantasies. And she's basically the driver of it all. She's the goddess. They want to please her. She's got all these crazy, raunchy, crazy fantasies, and she's fulfilling them all with these men. And so this is the second book to this series. There is a bad guy. Of course, there's a bad guy. In Snow White, the bad guy is the witch. So there is a bad guy in it. So I'm writing that, and it's going to come out in November of 2026. And so that's the book I'm finishing. I already published 2 books this year, Power Plays and Beach House Views. And then I have another book coming out under my other pen name for the YA contemporary romance. And so then I'll be writing a novella for Ruan Willow, also that will come out next winter, which is a bunch of swingers, and they are at a fish house.
And where can our listeners find you? Social media, website, future events, and where can they get your books?
You can find me on all different platforms. I'm on Instagram, Ruan Willow author. I'm also on Blue Sky, Ruan Willow, Facebook, Ruan Willow, Pinterest. I'm kind of in a lot of different places. My podcast is Oh Fuck Yeah with Ruan Willow, and it's F*CK. You can find that on all the different podcast apps and also on Full Swap Radio, which is, you can find them online. They also have an app, and mine air on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. My episodes air with them, and I think it's Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and 8 a.m. Wednesdays Central Standard Time. I'm also on the Pod Nation Media channel, which is on Roku TV and Fire TV devices. So it's a cable channel and all the podcast apps and YouTube, Ruan Willow Podcaster. My books are all over. I'm also an audiobook narrator. So I have books on basically all the platforms that are out there selling. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo. I mean, you name it, I'm on all of them. And so I have audiobooks and I have ebooks and paperbacks. So thank you so much for listening. I really had a blast and I'm just honored to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok, Threads at Official Page to Picture for more book to screen updates, behind the scenes content, and author interviews. Thanks so much, you guys. Until next time. Bye.
Bye bye now.